as well as on the SABC Plus app, available on the Google and Apple Play stores. Join in the conversation by finding us on X at Channel Africa numerical 1, Facebook at Channel Africa, Instagram at Channel Africa 1. You can also subscribe on YouTube. It's Channel Africa 1. You can send us your stories to newsroom at channelafrica.co.za, or alternatively, you can call us on +2711 714 4459. You can also send us your voice notes and comments to +27 63406 9126. That number again, it's +27 63406 9126. In your comments, please tell us in which country you are in. If you've missed any of our interviews, you can find them on www.channelafrica.co.za. Click on programming, look for Africa in Business, and you can find a podcast of whatever you have missed. Good afternoon.
Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
In an exclusive interview with Channel Africa, the African National Congress's first Deputy Secretary General in South Africa, Nomvula Mokonyane, highlighted the urgent need to address key infrastructure gaps that continue to hinder investment flows into Africa. Speaking on the sidelines of Africa Investment Leaders Forum in Johannesburg, Mokonyane also outlined practical steps and policy reforms that could help bridge these gaps and boost investor confidence across the continent. Channel Africa's business reporter Innocent Simosa has more.
With infrastructure development topping Africa's investment agenda, political and business leaders are calling for urgent action to unlock the continent's full economic potential. I sat down with the African National Congress First Deputy Secretary General Nomvula Mokonyane to explore solutions, and began by asking her how Africa can bridge its critical infrastructure gaps.
Infrastructure is quite key for investment and the movement of goods and services. The second thing is political stability. The third thing is about access to finances, and the third are the trade agreements that must exist amongst ourselves as Africans, looking at how best we can make sure that our own critical resources that we possess are produced and processed here, and are also easily accessible for the inhabitants, as well as for other distinct areas of consumption. We can't only be a continent that looks at consuming finished goods. We should actually process goods and make sure that they go out of the continent being a processed goods. What is of importance? It's leadership, it's infrastructure, it's access to finances, it's most importantly the skills that are required.
I also asked her what would a truly investor-friendly Africa look like in 10 years.
First it would be the issues around agricultural products. We possess the most demanded critical minerals that we can also be able to export, but also trade amongst ourselves and make sure that we deal with hunger in Africa, we deal with poverty in Africa. And then the last issue would be about a skilled nation. A skilled continent. We've got a huge population of young people, just as the Chinese have done, taking their young people throughout the world. We need to also expose young Africans to the world so that then they can acquire the skills, they can sell their skills and come back and grow Africa.
Executive Director of Globe Petroleum, Ninis Chinara, emphasized the importance of collaboration among African entrepreneurs to drive sustainable growth and shared prosperity across the continent.
I think it's like we've said, it's a male-dominated field, so obviously that's very hard. But I also just think, if I speak to my country mostly, I think we've been trying to push, especially to try make sure there are more indigenous companies. I also think it's up to us as the people who are in the sector to come together, right, and try to collaborate, because if 5 or more or more retailers come together and get a vessel, that can be done. But I think we're not there yet, where people can collaborate and come together and try to eliminate those gaps.
As Africa pushes for deeper investment and development, these voices echo a common message that bold reforms and regional cooperation and entrepreneurial collaboration are key in unlocking the continent's full potential. For Channel Africa News, I am Innocent Samosa in Johannesburg.
Thanks for listening to Channel Africa. This is Africa in Business. And let's just have a look at what's coming up in the show. We will be looking at scores of daybreak food employees who took to the streets to raise their plight at the company's facilities in Delmas. There had been a protest over unpaid salaries there and the collapse of the company's operations. And remember, in a bit, we will be crossing to a sister station, SAFM, to have a look at the G20 coverage. And I obviously mentioned earlier that starting from January next year, food distributors in Uganda will be required to blend locally produced ethanol into petrol sold across the country. And many African countries had been actually going on that particular trajectory. It's African solutions for African problems, and we will cross over to Ethiopia to talk there to one of investment advisors who will be telling us about how the IMF Executive Board has just completed the third review under the executive, or rather extended credit facility arrangement for Ethiopia. This is Channel Africa.
G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa. Ahoy, matey!
Captain here to help, right, boys?
Set sail with us on a digital voyage like no other. Channel Africa has a treasure trove of awesomeness. That is our website and social media pages.
Tell me, why are you here?
We want you to be part of our adventure.
The winds are changing, Captain. And this time...
Imagine a world where curiosity knows no bounds, where entertainment meets enlightenment, and where every click leads to the African perspective. Visit us on our website, www.channelafrica.co.za, or follow us on Instagram or on X at Channel Africa One. Go on, like us on Facebook at Channel Africa One. So, spread the word. Tell a friend that Channel Africa's online variety is what they need on the web. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
Okay, so there we are. Let's then connect with so it's SAFM Channel Africa, as we do every day around this time, once a week from 4:15 onwards, and we continue with our G20 coverage. So today, significantly, we look at the work of South Africa. What does South Africa have to do in the build-up to the summit in November? And since the country took over the G20 presidency, there have been, listen to this one, 13 working groups that met up to come up with South Africa's G20 priorities. So with me is, from the Channel Africa side is Thabiso Lehoko.
Good afternoon, Ashraf. And basically, the G20 working groups are made up of government officials, international organizations, and civil society to collectively shape the G20's approach to issues requiring international cooperation. Now, to discuss this and other issues, we are joined on the line by specialist researcher at the SABC, Velemseni Mtiani. Good afternoon, Velemseni, and welcome to our G20 coverage.
Okay, we do have you there, right, Velemseni? Yeah? I'm just trying to see if we can, in fact, have connected. Velemseni, do we have you with us? Okay, that's going to be a disconnect if we don't sort that out. Let's see. So, Thabiso, we'll certainly connect pretty shortly. But by the way, I mean, I do find someone asked me this, in fact, this morning, Thabiso, just about the importance of this collaboration. We for South Africa, Channel Africa for Africa, and coming together with this all about G20 countdown. I mean, this is so significant, isn't it?
It is, definitely. I mean, the G20 platform endeavors to promote sustainable development and shared prosperity, with an emphasis on development and the most important development within the international system. But then and again, Ashraf, we've got Willem Seni on the line. I think you may want to take it on there.
Okay, perfect. Willem Seni, Imtiani, appreciate you connecting with us here on the National Pulse on this significant SAFM Channel Africa collaboration.
Yes, good afternoon to you and to the listeners at home.
Right, now we've already set the scene in your absence, but just remind us, right? Lots of things needs to happen around the G20 summit, right? But from a South African perspective, what is South Africa's priorities? What do we need to do?
Sure. Firstly, let's just say it's about 141 days before the summit takes place in November this year. But there are about 4 issues that South Africa needs to put forward that they said they've been mandated by the cabinet to put forward, that when the declaration is read in November, these issues must be included. Firstly is the strengthening of disaster resilience and response. We are all aware that the rate of climate-induced natural disasters is affecting mainly countries all over the world, but particularly the developing countries are the ones that are having devastating impact. And the inability, therefore, of rebuilding after they have experienced those climate change disasters appears to be very hectic for them in terms of the finances. So South Africa is elevating this issue at the leaders level to say they are calling for the global community, including international institutions, development banks, and the private sector to scale up the post-disaster reconstruction, in particularly for the developing countries. And also, secondly, they're saying they want to ensure that the debt sustainability for the low-income countries is actually taken into consideration. We will know that most of the developing countries, they spend a lot of their revenue that they collect, tax revenue and any other forms of revenue, in terms of servicing their debts. Let's put it clearly, debt in itself is very good. But unfortunately for the developing countries, they found themselves trapped when it comes to debt. They are servicing debt, which by and large are offered, they are servicing the debts that are for the monies or the loans that they have taken from the institutions that are coming from the developed nations. So therefore, the South Africa is saying for the sake of the inclusive growth, that developing economies, including many in Africa, are facing an unsustainable level of debt, which limits their ability to invest in things like infrastructure, healthcare, education, and other development needs. Therefore, South Africa says, come November 2025, when this declaration is made, they want to make sure that these are involved. And also, thirdly, they're saying they want to mobilize for just energy transition financing. We will all know that most of the developing nations are now moving ahead when it comes to the green industrial revolution in terms of just energy transition. But the developing nations are being left behind. Why? It's because the issue of financing the transition is very expensive for the developing nations. And then therefore South Africa says with their presidency of G20, they want to put it to the leaders summit to say there has to be a good way to finance the just energy transition. It should not be left only to the developing nations to sort this on themselves, because they find themselves on the back foot of many issues. But and the 4th point, which is another important point, they are saying they want to harness the critical minerals for the inclusive growth and the sustainable development. We all know that particularly the African continent and most of the developing nations, they are endowed with a lot of these critical minerals, which are very useful for the military, very useful for the military development of military equipment, development of technological gadgets. So they are saying they want to leverage these critical minerals so that the extractive nature of that has been persistent over a long period of time comes to an end, such that those countries that are having these critical minerals, they can bargain and use them to bring development and bring inclusive growth for their communities. These are the 4 elements that South Africa is putting forward to say, come the summit, leader summit, they want to put these 4 elements.
Okay, let me bring in then Thabiso Lehoko he's speaking to us from the Channel Africa perspective. Thabiso?
Willem Seni, I'd like us to have a look at the themes, solidarity, equality and sustainability. How do these then tie in within the priorities that you've just mentioned?
Look, as we know that when South Africa talks about the themes of the solidarity, South Africa has been saying that they do not believe in the world that just functions with some pockets of excellence elsewhere and the sea of poverty or in other areas. So South Africa is saying for the world to move forward, the world needs to come together, and they are putting this in the different working groups to say whether it's education, whether it's technology, whether it comes to women's participation in economy, whether it is coming to access to education, to healthcare. They are saying there has to be a solidarity. The world that will move forward is the world that will be showing solidarity on the issues that are affecting humanity throughout the globe. And when it comes to equality, I know this is very tough because the world as we are living in, even here in South Africa, we know that the issue of inequality is huge, but also this is a global problem. And South Africa is saying, how can we then move forward as the world where we leave others far behind and there are others who are moving far ahead? And then they're saying they are pushing that we should have solidarity when we're addressing issues that, but we must also come together in terms of bridging the gap of inequality in all forms, in terms of the digital divide, in terms of the economic growth. It appears that the more developing countries developed countries they are moving on themselves, and those who are developing are getting stuck on themselves. And also they are talking about the sustainability. We know that while we are saying that the world must move forward and using the resources of today to move forward, they must be considerate of the future. You will know that we are about 5 years away from the 2030 United Nations Sustainable Goals Development target. And we know that we are sitting at about 17% of achieving those targets. And then South Africa is saying, whatever we are doing, particularly because these are very influential economies at the G20, which constitute about 85% of the global GDP and 75% of the international trade and having 2/3 of the population. So the decisions that will be pushed at the G20 level are likely to affect the globe in its entirety. So South Africa is saying with these three themes of solidarity, equality and sustainability, they are saying they want to see a world that is that has solidarity when they're dealing with the issues, that is bridging the issue of inequality, that also thinks of the future when it comes to consuming of the resources for today, but also thinking of the future. So sustainable development with sustainable development in its mind. So South Africa, in all these deliberations of these working groups, from the Shepherd track to the finance track, they are pushing so that by the time the summit comes, they have put these arguments wherever they are not reaching the consensus. They are hoping that when the summit takes place, at least these issues would have been advocated for and they would be aligning with these themes. So those priorities, they fit exactly with the themes that South Africa has put forward.
We are aware that South Africa is the last country to take the G20 presidency in what is called a 20-year cycle, right? So with that in mind, there's a natural 20-year G20 review, right? Would South Africa then be part of that, putting that review together, and how far is South Africa with that?
Yeah, you have correctly said it. They call it the G20 at 20 years. It's a reflection on key achievements and the way forward. So this particular responsibility is unique because there's no other G20 presidency that has ever been tasked with this, whether it was a 5-year or 10-year or 15-year. But when it comes to this at a 20-year, they are saying, South Africa, lead us, show us what are the achievements of G20 in terms of the resolutions. I think it's important to mention that G20 resolutions, whenever they are taken, at times they do not get enforced at a certain level. So it depends on the presidency at that time, the ability to pull the resources and pull the consensus among the member states so that when those resolutions are taken, they get to be implemented in a way that achieves some certain targets. So South Africa has been given this responsibility, and from our research point of view, when we speak to those who are in charge of G20, they are saying so far they are halfway through there when it comes to this review, because key issues in those reviews, the issue of the structure of the leadership of G20. We know that they are using a troika system, which means there is no permanent secretariat. Instead, they are using previous presidency, current presidency, and the next presidency of G20 working together. So in this case, it is Brazil, which is the previous presidency, South Africa, and then United States. But they are saying if they were to have a permanent secretariat, what does that mean for 20, and what structure will it take, and in which form, and in terms of the funding and the financing, and what impact will it bring in terms of the implementation of the resolutions of G20. So these are all the assessments that South Africa is leading. But remember, this is not a South Africa's project, it is a G20 project. So South Africa is consulting with all its members in G20, particularly working with these troika countries to say, how do we then ensure that the system of leadership of G20 is sustainable going forward?
Thabiso?
Well, Ashraf, very satisfied with the points that have been discussed so far, and I think this is where we have to wrap up our G20 coverage.
Okay, perfect. Thank you as always, Thabiso, and certainly appreciate your time with our specialist researcher at SABC News, and that's Velimseni Imtiyane. Thank you for that. Right now, of course, part of this unique collaboration between SAFM and Channel Africa, and we'll do this every Thursday from 4:15 all the way up to the G20. There is, however, some comments from you. Let's pick it up.
G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa, championing Africa through solidarity, equality, and sustainability.
Good afternoon once again. This is Africa in Business, and we have some breaking news here. And in our breaking news, South Africa's former Deputy President David Dabete Mabuza has passed away. The former Deputy President has been battling with ill health. Mabuza changed the political trajectory of his party, the African National Congress, ANC, and country at the height of his political career. It's time now to cross over to Buntle Headbush, who's standing by with our financial indicators.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thanks, Thabiso. Good afternoon. In our final look at the indicators this afternoon, $1 is trading at 17.61 in South Africa. In Botswana, it's trading at 13.14. In Namibia, at 17 Namibian dollars 61. The Zambian kwacha is trading at 23 kwacha 95. In Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 46. In Ethiopia, at 137 birr 5. Uganda, 3,568 shilling. And in Tanzania, it's at 2,624 shilling. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,532 naira. In Egypt, the dollar is trading at 49 Egyptian pound 33. In Tunisia, it's trading at 2 dinar 88. Algeria, 128 dinar 85. In Morocco, the dollar will cost you 8 dirham 87. In Angola, the dollar is trading at 912 kwanza, while the Congolese franc is trading at 2,857 to the US dollar. Now looking at commodities this afternoon, gold is trading at $3,332 and platinum at $1,364 per ounce, while Brent crude oil is at $68.90 a barrel. And those are your indicators this afternoon. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459 for Channel Africa Business. I am Buntle Headbush.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Get Channel Africa on DSTV Audio Bouquet. Channel 802.
Thanks, Buntle. And up next is Fila Nwati with the business of sport.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
And in our business of sport, we begin with football news. Former Football Association of Zambia, FAZ President Galusha Bwalia has been appointed vice chairperson of the national team technical subcommittee. Galusha, regarded as one of Zambia's finest footballers, brings a wealth of experience both on and off the pitch. FAZ did not reveal the stipend Bwalia will receive. The current technical director of the Football Association of Zambia, Lysin Zulu, also says his salary is not for public consumption. The FAZ technical director's salary is not publicly available, but information on coaching salaries within the Football Association of Zambia can provide context. For example, the Chimpolo Polo's coach salary was previously reported as $10,000 with the government and FAZ contributing to the cost. And the newly appointed national team assistant coach was also offered a monthly salary of $10,000. The government and FAZ also share the cost of the women's national team's coach's salary. Banyana sponsors Sasol have confirmed that its sponsorship agreement with the South African Football Association, which included support for the senior women's national team as well as the semi-professional Sasol League, has come to an end. The 16-year-long partnership officially came to an end at midnight on the 30th of June. This is a crippling blow to women's football in the country. Sasol says it's awaiting feedback from SAFA regarding the terms of a potential renewal, but until an agreement is reached, they no longer hold the right to associate with Banyana and the Sasol League. Sasol did not want to confirm or deny whether any conditions attached to agreeing on a deal. The fact that the contract has not been renewed will come as a major blow to SAFA. According to SAFA's chief executive, Lydia Munyepao, the two senior national teams were the only two sides that were able to generate some income for cash-strapped association.
We do not have sufficient resources that we used to have in terms of taking care of both the senior national teams, because the sponsorship for Bafana has greatly significantly reduced, whereas Banyana we've beefed up their bonuses. The bonuses that they get now are 4 times what they used to get. However, although we increased the bonuses 4 times, we have not managed to get more funding for the team. So it means that we have to dig deep into our pockets as a federation in order to be able to meet all these obligations. And a national team is not only about bonuses. There's so many other logistics that goes into a national team.
The Sasol sponsorship was worth in the region of $2 million per year. About $907,000 went to Banyana and the rest to the Sasol Women's League. The chairperson of SAFA's Finance Committee, Mxolisi Sibam, says they'll have to revisit their funding models for national teams in order to survive.
SAFA, we have to start with this to try and align SAFA to all the other successful federations of the world in football. Once we do that, then we'll see how they treat all these issues that become problems to us. Because it can be that a national team ends up being treated like as a key thing of revenue raising, like people like try to boost their revenue. Because we are a non-profit organization that has got a key responsibility to make sure that we produce national teams for this country, and at the same time, we develop football within this country.
Zimbabwean boxers face significant financial challenges despite some successes, with limited funding, lack of adequate training facilities, and difficulty securing sponsorships impacting their careers. While some boxers have achieved international recognition, financial constraints often hinder their ability to compete at higher levels and improve their overall prospects. Zimbabwe lacks substantial investment in boxing compared to other African boxing powerhouses like South Africa, Ghana, and Nigeria. Securing sponsorships is a major hurdle for Zimbabwean boxers, impacting their ability to train, travel, and compete. Let's end with volleyball. Volleyball empowerment teams Mozambique and Morocco impressed at the CAVB 2025 Beach Volleyball Continental Under-21 Championship held at the Matil Beach in Tetuan. Both Mozambique and Morocco qualified their men and women's teams for the FIVB Beach Volleyball Under-21 World Championship set for Puebla, Mexico from the 16th to the 19th of October this year. Mozambique's Under-21 men and women's teams are handled by Osvava and Bernardo Alirio under the Volleyball Empowerment Program as part of the coach support project worth $445,000. Meanwhile, Morocco are coached by Italian expert Ezio Goa, who is in charge of their senior and under-21 teams as part of the coach support project totaling $364,000. In total, 13 teams drawn from 8 countries took part in the men's competition, while the women's tournament featured 11 pairs from 8 nations. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Fidel Ngwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Africa in business on Channel Africa.
Thanks to Figile Lwati from our sport desk. You are listening to Channel Africa and we are broadcasting live from Auckland Park in Johannesburg, South Africa. We are on the DSTV, OWK, Channel 802 on OpenView on Channel 628 and you can live stream us on www.channelafrica.co.za as well as on the SABC Plus app available on the Google and Apple Play stores. Join in the conversation by finding us on X at Channel Africa numerical 1, Facebook at Channel Africa, Instagram at Channel Africa 1. You can also subscribe on YouTube at Channel Africa 1. You can send us your stories to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or alternatively, you can call us on +27 11 714 4459. You can also send us your comments and voice notes to +27 63406 9126. In your comments, please tell us in which country you are in. If you've missed any of our interviews, you can find them on www.channelafrica.co.za. Click on programming, look for Africa in Business. You can find a podcast of whatever you have missed.
Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
Starting from January next year, fuel distributors in Uganda will be required to blend locally produced ethanol into the petrol sold across the country as part of efforts aimed at lowering fuel costs and promoting a cleaner energy use. Under the new policy, fuel distributors must initially blend 5% ethanol into petrol, with plans to gradually increase the proportion to 20%. Depending on the local supply capacity. For more on this, we are now joined on the line by Dr. Maria Nakamya, an energy economist, researcher, and economics lecturer at Makerere University's Business School. Good afternoon, Dr. Maria, and thanks for making time for us this Thursday.
Good afternoon to you, and thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure, Doctor. How common is the blending of ethanol into petrol, and does it have any effect on the quality of fuel produced?
Okay, I will just say that the blending of ethanol is very common. And I will start by citing that this dates all the way back in the 1930s, that is Brazil. And during the oil crisis of the 1970s, it acted as a catalyst for the rest of the countries. And we see that currently Brazil blends up to 27%. But aside from that, the cars that use gasoline, they are over 70% that run on high levels, including E100, that is 100% ethanol. And now we see that even on the African continent, Zimbabwe started the blending all the way in the 1980s, and other countries have been following, like Malawi, Nigeria, including South Africa itself. And now here in the East African region, of course, we saw recently Kenya piloted its ethanol blending project. And now for Uganda, we are poised to start this next year. And when it comes to the quality of the fuel, I will say that it does not reduce its quality, but it simply does the opposite. Why? Because ethanol is an oxygenated fuel. It has a high octane number. If you compare with the regular petrol, that the octane number is less than 100, but for ethanol it is above 100. This octane number actually tells us about the quality of the fuel, how it allows ignition, and that is ignition that is not premature. Because of the oxygen in the ethanol, it allows the combustion, that efficient combustion of the fuel. And when this happens, it means that it has improved the quality of the fuel and something to do with emissions at the end of the combustion process.
This is a significant development for Uganda, and you talk of having plans to gradually increase the proportion to 20%, and obviously that depending on local supply capacity. Does this mean that you're first going to start by testing the grounds?
Yeah, we are going to start testing the ground. That's all I can say. Whenever you're coming with something big of that scale, of course you have to start. But when we look at the blending level of 5%, and I think this is something that can be manageable and contained. If we look at, for example, the production, because the feedstock is a key component when it comes to producing ethanol. The reason is it constitutes the largest share of the production cost, and we must ensure that there is efficient, a sustainable supply. And I can say that we are confident that given the 5%, the current production can meet the need or the demand that will be generated from the ethanol industry. And also, when you look at the plans that have been put in place, I think the country is ready to go.
The Energy Minister, Ruth Nankabirwa, says that this is part of a drive of the country to go green. What measurable reductions in CO2 or particulate emissions can be realistically expected at this point?
Okay, this is a very important question, because going green is only meaningful if it leads to measurable environmental gains. And first, I would say that indeed there can be significant reductions of both carbon dioxide and particulate matter. For example, like I earlier on mentioned, that ethanol is an oxygenated fuel. So it means that by improving the burning of the fuel, then it is going to reduce emissions from the tailpipe. But apart from that, studies, including my study, I carried out a study on this, and then you realize that the range that has been cited of emission savings per liter of ethanol ranges between 1 and all the way up to 2 kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalent. Now, in Uganda, we import over 2 billion cubic liters of petroleum. And now petrol itself constitutes over 48%. Now this 48%, if I take a round figure, it results into 1 billion liters per year of petrol. So if we start with a blending level of 5%, this is equivalent to 50 million liters a year. And if you do the math take the lowest value of 1 kilogram carbon dioxide equivalent saved per liter of ethanol, then this is going to result in over 55 million carbon dioxide equivalent. Of course, if we transform this to million metric tons, it's 0.05 million metric tons. It can look like a small number, but indeed, this is a measurable outcome that can grow into something bigger over time.
And I would imagine that no matter the numbers don't lie. Still on mathematics, without moving away from it, Uganda imports quite a lot annually of petroleum. The figure stands at $2 billion, and it seems as though this policy is a solution to a problem. Does this mean that the country might make a saving?
I will say that it's not only might, but it will indeed make a saving. Going by the figures of 50 million liters a year, consider the landed cost of a ton of petroleum product is about $1,000. If you do the conversion and the math, you see that every liter is about $0.7 something dollars, $0.7, you know. So this times the 50 million liters per year, it can translate to about $37 million saved per year. But now someone can also come in with the reasoning that while you're reducing this, but you're losing revenues. But even the revenues, because if we take the exercise tax, it's about $0.4. So the difference between the $0.7 and $0.4, it indeed shows that there will be a net gain even with the loss in the revenues. The reason is when you consider this price and also the best price of the ethanol, we see that we stand to gain. So the country will indeed save revenues. Benefit from this.
Now, it's good to hear that, Dr. Miria. And ethanol in Uganda will be made from local molasses, e.g., sugar, cassava. Is the country's agriculture sector in a position to keep up with the demand this move will bring about?
Yeah, that's a very good question, especially when it comes to the issues of food security. And also, like I mentioned, feedstock is a key component in producing. But the short answer I can give is yes, especially if we take it slow, start with the E5 up to 10 as we monitor the situation. One thing I can say is that there is underutilized land, but we can't rely on that. The most important point I can make is that there is significant room for scaling up production intensively. And the reason I'm saying this is that our average yields, and even on the African continent, they are still very low. For example, sugarcane itself, we produce about 60 tons per hectare. And if you compare elsewhere, it is above 70. Maize alone as a feedstock, our production is 2.6 tons per hectare. Compare elsewhere, above 6. And cassava itself, the same story. So even by considering the room for improvement, if we increase productivity and given a higher portion of the labor force that is engaged in agriculture, I think we can meet the market. But now, that said, it means we have to look at the possibility of food insecurity. This requires government to monitor this to avoid any spikes in food prices and also ensure that some crops like cassava or sugarcane can be grown on those lands that are not used for common crops, and I can say the marginal lands.
Dr. Miria, thanks for your time this afternoon, for talking to us about this significant development coming out from Uganda.
Yeah, thank you so much, and have a very good afternoon.
Thank you, Doctor. That was Dr. Miria Nakamya, an energy economist, researcher, and economics lecturer at the Makerere University Business School.
Ikiwa wewe ni msanii chipukizi na unayetaka kutambulisha muziki wako kwa hadhira pana, au unataka kutangaza muziki wako kwenye redio, tunaweza kusaidia, lakini kuna mambo machache unayoweza kufanya ili kuongeza nafasi zako za kufaulu. Tutumie muziki wako kupitia music@channelafrica.co.za. Tazama, tunahitaji maelezo yafuatayo kusaidia vyema: lebo, alama ya siri ya ISRC, kichwa, mwigizaji, mtunzi, mchapishaji, mwandishi, lugha na aina. Sikiliza wimbo wako kwenye redio, wimbo bora wa siku yako. Ukiwa na Channel Africa na muziki wako, hutawahi kuchoshwa kwa sababu tutacheza muziki wako. Pata uzoefu bora zaidi katika muziki wa Kiafrika, mtazamo wa Kiafrika.
Get Channel Africa on DSTV Audio Bouquet. Channel 802.
The International Monetary Fund Executive Board has just completed the third review under the Extended Credit Facility Arrangement for Ethiopia. The IMF says Ethiopian authorities have made significant progress in implementing fundamental macroeconomic reforms under the ECF approved in July 2024. Meanwhile, the East African country has also concluded an agreement on a memorandum of understanding with its official creditor committee, formalizing the debt treatment agreed in principle in March 2025, offering a relief to over $3.5 billion US. To unpack this, we are now joined on the line by Merit Fikere Johannes, founder and CEO of Pragma Investment Advisory. Merit, good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you too. Pleasure to be on the show as always.
Thank you, Merit. And let's shoot straight into the first question. The IMF noted strong progress on inflation control, export growth, and reserve accumulation. How sustainable is this in the long run?
Yes, definitely. So we just finished the fiscal year. We're going to be finishing the fiscal year after 5 days in Ethiopia. So it has been 1 year since we've been under the IMF package. Mind you, before we floated our currency last year, our export performance number was $3 billion. Okay, right now our export number, floated currency, all the unofficial trade has been coming on the balance of on the official balance of payment. Our export has reached $8 billion. Okay, and the FDI has gone up to $4 billion. Export of service has gone up to $50 billion. So the total forex inflow that the country has right now, as of today, is $32 billion. It used to be $24 billion before we flood the currency. So you can see that from a macro number perspective, balance of payment perspective, the numbers are so encouraging and very strong. So that's why the IMF recommended the progress that we have made so far. Of course, there's a number of challenges on the ground in terms of taxation, in terms of cost of living, inflation, all those. Yes, from a macro number, it's different, but macro number, things are tough. One has to say that.
Yeah.
But however, yeah.
Look, in a nutshell, I'd just like to ask you this question. With the official creditor committee under the G20 Common Framework, MOU, now finalized for over $3.5 billion of relief, what does it mean for bondholders?
Absolutely. So for the bondholders, I think this is one of the anticipated reviews from the bondholder perspective, because now that Ethiopia has officially signed the MOUs, and when Ethiopia has also got $8.4 billion of bilateral debt restructuring arrangement. So now the coming August, the Ministry of Finance is going to be sitting down with the bondholders in terms of to finalize the discussion with the the Euro bondholders to restructure the debt. So the one of the things right now what the bondholders are also expecting is the DAS report from this committee review, which is the debt assessment sustainability report as part of the review. Based on that review, the bondholders will negotiate with the Ministry of Finance. It is expected to be finalized before this year end, and will officially finalize the Ethiopian debt restructuring process. I think the bondholder negotiation is the final component of the debt restructuring of Ethiopia. So once after that, I think the Ethiopia will have a final structure in terms of its debt commitment for the next coming 3 years within the program and beyond as well.
Well, Merit, thank you very much for your time, and I'm happy that you made the time to actually get to talk to us about the IMF Executive Board having concluding the Extended Credit Facility Arrangement for Ethiopia.
Pleasure.
That was Merit Fikere Johannes, founder and CEO of Pragma Investment Authority.
Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
Thanks for listening to Channel Africa. My name is Thabiso Lehoko. I had been standing in for Tami Ngubeni. It's Thursday. Tomorrow is a Friday. A great show indeed. We did our coverage on the G20 with sister station SAFM, and obviously caught up with Mered Figueroa-Honas, who told us about the IMF's agreement with Ethiopia on the extended debt agreement, or rather, it's actually not in particular the debt agreement, but the extended credit facility, as one would put it. And obviously, we listened to an exclusive interview that the African National Congress's first Deputy Secretary General in South Africa, Nomvula Mokonyane, had with the Channel Africa earlier on, highlighting the urgent need to address key infrastructure gaps that continue to hinder investment flows into Africa. And thanks indeed for listening again. Africa in Business. Tomorrow is another day, and goodbye.